Hello, I'm Maureen, the Museum Education Manager at the Museum of the Earth, and this is episode 3 of our How to Make a 3D Fossil Tile. And we're looking at Barbara Page's Rock of Ages Sands of Time exhibit. And if you notice, there are numbers underneath each one of these tiles. Those represent 1,000,000 years. These tiles have venture 544 million years, and Barbara has created each one of these to represent that time period. As you can see from these tiles, they expand across tiles, but each one has a story to tell of 1,000,000 years. We've talked a little bit about in previous episodes how to make it three-dimensional, how to draw it out, and how to make your tile. This last one is going to be how do we finish it up? How do we add color to add it? So some of these tiles have kind of a similar color. There's not a lot of different colors, but the one up above where you're seeing oranges and tans and blacks and grays, Barbara has pulled many different colors from the rocks of the area that it was being excavated from, as well as the fossils and how they represent. So to complete a tile, we wanted you to step through each one of these. So each one of our episodes talk about different aspects of creating these three-dimensional tiles so you can do these at home yourself.
Maria here again to take you through our third and final step, painting. We have a couple colors of paint here from across the spectrum, and we're just going to squeeze tiny little amounts onto our palette plate. A lot of these I only use tiny little dabs of, so you should be sparing with your first squeezes. Once we have all our paint set, let's kick this into high gear. Alright, I'm going to start with the background. Originally I was planning to go with a more realistic color that matched my photograph better, which I got from mixing one of my greens with some browns and black. But I gave that up pretty quickly and just went for the pure green since it meant I wouldn't have to keep mixing colors. I'm applying the color with a thick round brush that's big enough to give me good coverage, but small enough that I can use it to blend. Once I have a good layer or two of the green and you can't really see the grid in the sketch beneath it, I decide it's time to get a little bit weird. I dab just the tips of my brush into a red, a blue, and a purple, just so that I have the tiniest little bit, and I dab it onto the wet green base layer. Then I sort of jitter my hand up and down really fast so the two colors blend together. I stop before they blend completely and you can't tell the difference, and so that there's just a little bit of modeling effect on there. I do that going back and forth between the green and the red, blue, and purple until I like how it looks. Then it's time to move on to the fossil itself. I switched to a smaller brush since we're going to do some detail work. Since the background is kind of dark, I use a coat of pure white acrylic paint to paint over where I want the fossil to be, just like we did with the gesso. Then, like I have every time, I start from the bottom and work up. To contrast the green background, I decide to go for a sort of warm tone to the fossil, so I mix a little bit of yellow with the white. That's going to be the base color for the fossil itself. Working one whirl at a time, I paint first with that light yellow. Then I want to add shadows to this piece, even the parts that are already 3D, since they're only slightly raised. Using my reference and the real lumps and bumps, I paint on red shadows in the dark areas and use a yellow-tan mid-tone to sort of blend that dark red with the light yellow base. I work while the paint is wet so I can get a nice, smooth mix between the colors. In the very darkest shadows, like the inside of the whorl, I paint purple. I don't use any black here. Adding black will make the color darker, yes, but it will also make the color duller and grayer. White has the same effect, but lighter. In fact, I use a tiny little bit of pure white on the highlights, and it ends up looking a little bit blue in comparison to the warm yellows and reds. I want my colors to be bright, but it's really a matter of preference. You can stick with natural browns and grays if you like, or you can be mostly really realistic with little touches of color on the highlights, or you can go completely crazy and use blues and pinks and whatever makes you happy. When I'm satisfied with my paint job and the highlights and shadows are where I want them, I paint a little line of purple on the right and a little line of red on the left. Eventually I decided I want the red to be blended out a little bit. This creates a shadow underneath the fossil and separates it from the background, making it sort of pop out, making the shadows and highlights look sort of brighter in comparison. The process is the same for each whirl. Light yellow base, shade with tan, red, and purple while the paint is still wet, and then outline with shadows. And of course, I always keep my reference right by my side. You might see me sort of jumping back to ones I've already done. That's because as I'm working, I'm coming up with new ideas and sort of seeing what works, and I'm going back to the ones I've already done so that I can make them look better. When I'm done painting my fossil, I decide that I really like it and I want to ditch parts of my original plan. So the original fossil had these sort of broken pieces of the bryozoan around the whorls. So I decide I don't want to put them on there because I spent way too much time shading. Instead, I decide I want to put them sort of around the fossil to just sort of fill out the composition a little bit. I use the same colors that I used on the Archimedes, the light tan, the red, the purple, and draw a grid. Once I'm done with my broken bryozoan pieces and I'm satisfied with my composition, I decide I'm done. So I sign my name in the corner. Thank you all for joining me on this journey. I hope that you like what I've made, and I hope that I can inspire you to make something beautiful as well. Happy holidays.